So let's dive into something really cool today. We're talking about a piece of research that introduces HoneySat. And what is HoneySat? Well, it's the world's first ever super high-fidelity honeypot, and it's designed specifically to catch satellite hackers. It is, quite literally, a digital trap set in the vacuum of space. We're going to see exactly how these brilliant folks pulled it off.
You know, it's easy to forget, but our entire modern world, pretty much everything we do, runs on satellites. Your GPS, global banking, the internet itself, it all depends on this invisible infrastructure humming along way up there. But that dependency, that's a huge vulnerability. Just think about it for a second. What if one person, one adversary, could just flip a switch and turn it all off? That's the nightmare scenario that keeps security researchers up at night.
You could say we're in a brand new kind of space race, but this time it's not about planting a flag. It's about securing what we've already sent into orbit. And as you're about to see, our defenses, well, they haven't quite kept up with our ambitions.
So why is this happening now? What's making our satellites such tempting targets all of a sudden? Well, the research really boils it down to three big things. First, there are just way more targets. We're launching satellites at a crazy pace. Second, the tech you need to talk to them, ground stations, has gotten so much cheaper, so much more accessible. And third, a lot of satellite systems still rely on this idea of security by obscurity. That's basically just hoping that because your system is unique and the details are hidden, nobody will bother to figure it out. And as we've learned the hard way over and over again in cybersecurity, that is not a strategy, it's a prayer.
And look, the stakes here are astronomically high. We're not talking about minor glitches. A single successful attack could mean massive communication blackouts. It could grind global financial markets to a halt. Or even worse, it could trigger something called the Kessler syndrome. Now that is a truly terrifying idea. It's a chain reaction where one satellite collision creates a cloud of debris, which then takes out other satellites, creating even more debris, until entire orbits become completely unusable for generations.
So how do you defend against an enemy you can't see, whose methods you can only guess at? Well, you don't wait for them to attack. You set a trap. And that brings us to this incredibly clever solution, the satellite honeypot. It's kind of like this. If you want to study bears in the wild, you don't just sit around and hope one wanders past your tent, right? No, you put out a pot of honey to attract them. A cybersecurity honeypot? It's the exact same idea. You build a decoy system that looks, feels, and acts just like the real thing. You put it out there to lure in attackers, and then you sit back, watch, and log their every single move.
And this is what the hacker sees. Now, this isn't some simple knockoff or a cheap mock-up. This is a fully interactive, totally believable ground control station. It's got the real-time satellite tracking, the command line interfaces, the radio controls, everything. The whole goal is to make it absolutely indistinguishable from the real deal.
And here's why that's so important. It all comes down to something called telecommands, or TCs. Just think of TCs as the remote control signals for the satellite. They're the instructions you send from the ground up to space. If a hacker can figure out how to send the right telecommands, they don't just mess with the satellite, they own it. They can take over the entire mission.
Okay, so faking a multi-million-dollar piece of hardware that's whipping around the planet at thousands of miles an hour, that's a pretty incredible challenge, right? To pull it off, the team had to build what's called a digital twin, a virtual copy so precise, so accurate that it could fool not just human operators, but all their malicious tools, too.
All right, let's walk through exactly how this amazing deception works. So first, an attacker finds this decoy ground station on the internet and connects to it. Then, they use that realistic interface to try and send a command. Now, this is where the real magic happens. The command hits a radio simulator, which checks if the fake satellite is actually overhead and in range, just like a real one would be. If the timing's right, the command gets passed to real operational flight software. That software then asks the satellite simulator for data, like, hey, what are my sensor readings? The simulator runs all the physics and calculates a totally realistic response. And finally, the honeypot sends back perfectly convincing data. That's called telemetry, which completes this brilliant little loop and tricks the attacker into thinking they're really talking to a piece of hardware in orbit.
And when I say the simulation is deep, I mean it is deep. We're not talking about a simple script. This thing is a full-blown physics engine. It's calculating orbital mechanics in real time. It's tracking the satellite's orientation, its power levels based on how much simulated sunlight is hitting its solar panels. It's even generating fake pictures from a camera pointed at a virtual Earth. It's incredible.
Okay, so building this incredible digital mirage is one thing, but the billion-dollar question is,
Does it actually work? Is it convincing enough to succeed out in the real world? To find out, the researchers put HoneySat through a super tough 3-part test.
First up, maybe the hardest test of all. Could this simulation actually fool the people who do this for a living? The ones who operate real satellites every single day?
The results were, well, they were stunning. The team got 10 experienced satellite operators and gave them hands-on access to HoneySat. A full 90% of them, 9 out of 10, said they could not tell the difference between the honeypot and the actual mission it was mimicking. I mean, that's about as good a seal of approval as you can get.
Okay, so we can fool the pros. Test 1, passed with flying colors. But what happens when you plug this thing into the public internet and just wait? Will real attackers take the bait?
And boom, it absolutely worked. The trap was sprung. Over 5 different deployments, HoneySat successfully lured in real-world hackers, and it captured 22 distinct commands that were specific to the satellite's flight software. These weren't just random internet bots scanning ports. These were people specifically targeting a satellite system.
And if you look at the logs, it tells a fascinating story. You've got attackers coming in from Egypt, from the US, and using anonymous networks from places like Sweden and France. And they were targeting honeypots that were disguised as both American and German satellite missions. They weren't just poking around either. They were using specific targeted commands like TM dump to try and steal data, or OBC update status, an attempt to actually mess with the onboard computer. All right, now for the grand finale. The final and by far the most ambitious test. The simulation is so good it can fool experts. It's so good it can fool real attackers. But is it realistic enough to talk to an actual satellite that's currently flying in space?
And here it is. This is the proof. The team worked with an aerospace company to hook HoneySat up to a live mission. What you're looking at is a spectrogram, a picture of radio signals. The signal up top, that's a command sent from the HoneySat system on the ground. And the signal on the bottom, that is the genuine response beamed back down from an operational satellite in low Earth orbit. The digital twin successfully talked to the real thing. It's just incredible.
The success of all these tests, it really marks a turning point. So what does this all mean for the future? Where do we go from here?
What this all boils down to is a massive shift from guessing to knowing. Before HoneySat, our ideas about how hackers might target satellites were mostly just theory, speculation. We were defending against ghosts. But now, for the very first time, the security community has a tool to safely go out and collect hard, real-world data on the actual tactics, techniques, and procedures being used by our adversaries.
So, in effect, this research has built the very first digital fire alarm for our critical space infrastructure. It proves that we can detect and study these threats before a real disaster happens. The only question left is, now that we have it, are we going to install it before the fire starts?